right, we are doing a whiskey review, and that's churro. Why are we sitting here? Again, who cares? Now churro's licking the camera, love it. All right, so we've done 2 of the Traverse City Whiskey Company signature editions. Now we're going to do the 3rd. This is their straight bourbon whiskey. Barrel proof, 59.2% alcohol, and 6 years aged as it's written on the label. It's interesting, when I read the back label, it says aged for more than 4 years, bottled at barrel proof. It's actually the same back label, different color, as the whiskey we did for video 3, the wheated one. So I think they were just trying to save some money with a TTB and not having to submit multiple labels. All right, so bourbon whiskey, 6 years. Yep, I was expecting a little bit of mashiness on the nose because whiskey ages slower in Michigan, because, again, the weather, we talked about it. And 6 years is still on the younger side. But the color, well, we got a white background. If you see the color here, it is a bit darker than the previous 2. Again, more time in the barrel. They also could have been a different toast level or a different char level, but it is darker. There are some particulate matter in there, which is normal. Just generally, you don't look, you just pour. And it smells like bourbon. It has a much stronger alcohol note to it than the wheated bourbon, even though it's basically the same strength as the wheated bourbon that we just tried. But it's richer, you know, there's a lot more like butterscotch and caramel notes, much more riper fruit than before. So there's just more going on in your nose than the wheated bourbon, which is, again, to be expected. Yeah, definitely bourbon, and definitely not wheated to the same degree. It's a lot hotter on your palate. So if you haven't had barrel strength whiskey, you know, it might affect you. But it is really rich. There is a little bit of mashiness, but less so than on the nose, which is a good thing. Mashiness doesn't continue. It's not over tannic, you know, like where it's just so astringent on your palate. It's quite nice. The flavors are lingering and the alcohol note then lowers so that you can approach the flavors more. But yeah, it's a nice blend of the flavor notes you get from wood, you know, vanilla, caramel, butterscotch, that sort of thing, and like a ripe, dried fruit flavor. It's not overpowering in either way, and it carries in the palate. I like it. Like this, I like the last one. I like this one.
I like it a lot.
I wish they paid me to say this, but this is a really nice whiskey. You know, their signature edition. The straight bourbon whiskey is really nice. Now I'm curious. I want to see what a 7-year aged one is like, and an 8-year. You know, where that peak, where the bourbon starts to get too much wood note and kind of gets in the way of that like fruitiness to it. But yeah, these guys are doing a good job. Okay, so the next indirect contact bit is a 3-ring snaffle. This is a hollow loose ring, mouth loose ring. The reason for these stickies is because it's hollow, the opening where the main ring goes into the bit can get big and can cause pinching of the horse's lip. So that's why that's there. Some bits don't pinch, so you don't need this. So this is going to look a lot like a pelham, which is interesting. I got a fun bit here. This is a loose ring pelham. You see how it rotates, and this action is going to look very similar to this action. So in a lot of ways, this loose ring pelham is similar to the 3-ring snaffle, but it's different in some ways. And I know I don't have reins on it. I know you're going to comment below. I get it. I don't care. So similar to the pelham, you could put converters here, 2 reins, whatever you want. But when I pull this ring, there's going to be a downward pressure on the cheek piece, putting downward pressure on the pull, and there's going to be upward movement of the bit. Let's watch. You see down, up, Very clear here. Now again, you know, sister is just sitting here totally comfortable. This is not any major thing. She is not offended at all by this. So very similar to a Pelham, you're saying, and I agree. The only difference with this 3-ring is there's no chain back here. And the loose ring action, so the bit more or less stays in the same orientation in the mouth. When you go to pull, you see how the bit is staying at the same angle here, where in a Pelham, the bit itself would rotate as well. Those two factors make this bit more dynamic. So it is closer to a loose ring or direct contact bit than a Pelham is. Now you can put a chain on this, brings it closer to a Pelham, or brings it closer to this loose ring snaffle that we spoke about before. But I can't remember the last time I've ever put a chain on a 3-ring. If I wanted to put a chain on a 3-ring, what I would do instead is put a swale on. We'll talk about a swale in a minute. This is an amazing bit. You can do amazing things with it because, again, similar to a Pelham, your main ring here is just the same. You know, if you're pulling similar to how you would, you pull up, which releases, look, this cheek piece now is completely bowed. It is putting no downward pressure. So this is just like a direct contact loose ring. When you add the rotation in, it changes the bit. But it is fantastic. It's a fantastic bit. And I would argue in a lot of ways, if you put converters on this, this is maybe the second easiest bit to ride in after a Pelham. It's kind of like a bridge between a Pelham and a loose ring snaffle because it's more dynamic than a Pelham, but also gives you and the horse more stability, and it's easier to get a little bit of flexion in the pull, in the mid-neck and base of the neck than it is a loose ring, but a bit harder than a Pelham. You are able to get a horse more light on a loose ring, assuming the mouthpiece is the same and the shank length is the same. You know, in a Pelham, again, I'm going to bring out the loose ring Pelham. From my thumb here to my index finger there, that is the shank length. This is not a very big one, but if you see here, the shank length is not very long. So your rotational, the inertia you can create is not very much compared to a normal Pelham that is used. So this is a very soft bit. Again, hollow mouth snaffle, you know, 2-piece snaffle with a 3-ring. Very light. Obviously, you can have twisted versions. There's a 4-ring version with another ring here, which gives you more leverage. So you're applying more force. I have a few of those. I used to show one of my horses in one for a couple months back probably 7 years ago. I haven't used a 4-ring in a while, but the 3-ring is really a great bit. You do have to set it like a direct contact bit. I wouldn't set it high in any way. It does have a very good give to it, but I wouldn't set it low. The reason I wouldn't set it low is because then you get into the way of the action of the rotation. If it's too low, that rotation action is reduced. So you're reducing the function of the bit and the reason why you would have 3 rings. So I would set it medium to how we showed what we did the loose ring. I love this bit. It's a fantastic bit. Let's move on to a swale. It is a bit that most people don't use, but it is really a cool bit. Okay, this is a swale. Saw it in video 2. It is similar to a Pelham, but different. Before we go over the swale, there are, similar to the 3-ring, similar to the Pelham, there are some things that when you fit this bit, it's important to check. With every bit, it's important to make sure that your noseband here is not crooked and that the band itself is parallel with the 2 rings on each side. You know, you don't want the bit crooked, but the noseband straight. You want them parallel. Fit it correctly. When you use 2 reins, make sure that the tails of the reins point the same direction. Seems like a small detail, but it affects how the buckle of the rein lays once it leaves your hand, whether you always have it on the left side or the right side. If they are opposite like this, they will lay differently, and it's very annoying. Little details like that make sure that your feel is consistent. The next detail, we touched on this with the Pelham, is you got to set the chain. This chain is actually the same chain we used for the Pelham, but if you look very closely, the chain is not twisted and it's not super loose. So if I were to pull the second rein, which is this one here, and it would rotate the bit, it would actually tighten the chain on the horse's chin. If I set the chain very loose and I would pull this, the shank would go all the way back like this and be effectively useless. I hate saying that because it just shows that someone doesn't understand the bit and or doesn't care to set it properly. And it's important to do this the same time every day and to make sure of it before you get on. The last thing to make sure before you get on, what I always do is I come here to the front before I get on and I will move the cheek pieces out like this. This is my test for how high or low it is in the horse's mouth, alongside just visually looking at the bit in the horse's mouth. This is just an easy thing. I could do this and see if I like the feel. It's important to check all this to make sure it's set correctly so that when you're on the horse, you're not wondering, oh, am I on the first ring or the second ring of the chain? How high is the bit? You know, you're not wondering about that. You have your feel, and you could say, oh, I have this feel, and the chain is set here, noseband is set here, that is the same as yesterday. So if my feel is different from yesterday, it is not because the bit and bridle are fit differently. That's crucial. Fit your stuff the same every day, unless you intentionally decide to change it. Okay, how is the swale different than the Pelham? Because a lot of the mechanics look similar. You have a shank, you have a ring, you have a chain. This thing is different. This is on a swale is called a ram's horn for pretty obvious reasons. What happens in a swale, it's quite curious. When you pull the main rein, it's a direct contact bit to the mouthpiece. This is a big black vulcanite piece, so direct contact. When I pull the second rein, it rotates the shank, applying pressure to the chin, similar to a Pelham, but unlike a Pelham, it only pulls the chain. It does not pull the cheek piece here. You see, when it is rotating like this, it is not moving the cheek piece. So this does not apply pull pressure by its action. That is the main difference. And what's interesting about a swale is you can get a horse perfectly light. And it's beautiful. The problem is it is harder to use because you can get a horse really light. You have to have the hands to do it. You know, you can't be hacking away and the horse sit there, oh, super happy. No, you have to have the hands to do it. But you can make them very light, which can be great for the biomechanics, great for your flat work, depending on what you're trying to do. I've found it is kind of rare that a horse is happy with a swale in the ring, because most horses do like to load the bit a certain amount on approach to fences, where a swale, because it can get a horse all the way light, horses don't like to load the swale. So then they'll try to load it, feel like, oh, I don't want to do that, and then, they'll pop off. That's not a great feel for the rider, doesn't result in an engaged horse on takeoff, and so it's not a very common show bit. But on the flat, it can do wonders. You can teach a horse how to be light and build muscle so well with a swale. Now, I know probably one thing you're thinking, oh, if I can get a horse all the way light on a swale, it must be so much stronger than a Pelham. No. This mouthpiece is huge. I mean, look at it. It's huge. It's not sharp. We have the same chain as the Pelham we had before. The shank is maybe a half inch longer, not much at all. It is because it works differently, not because we increased the sharpness, but we changed the activity. And that's a big misunderstanding with a lot of bits. People assume that just because a horse is light, it's because you're applying more force. No, you're changing how you apply those forces. This can be a great bit, and I truly love this bit. I will say it really requires someone with stable hands on their own to be able to use, because of how horses can get light on it. And then normally what I would do if I flat a horse in a swale, I'll flat them in a swale, but then they will, thanks sister, then I will show them in a different bit, probably a direct contact bit, like a loose ring or a full cheek or a 3-ring, something like that. Or potentially, you know, I've done sometimes with horses, swale to flat, double bridle to show. But most people would probably go swale to pelham. Back to what I said about pelhams, I just don't have a good feeling with them. That doesn't mean the bit is wrong or bad, it's just my own preference. But again, I want you to see that a lot of the difference, when you perceive as difference in action and bits, is actually the same action. You know, the similarity between a 3-ring and a pelham, or a 3-ring and a snaffle. So it doesn't make sense for me to fit a D-ring bit, an egg butt bit, you know, different pelhams with different mouthpieces. I'd fit them basically the same and the rules still apply. I didn't get into anything crazy like bumper bits, hackamores, hackabits, that sort of thing, because pretty much 95% of the time when I see someone in a hackamore or a hackabit, they're using it because they're lost and they're trying to fill gaps. But those bits never fix the gaps. They're just something in the interim. Almost always when I use a hackabit, it's because I don't have an answer and I need something for that day. It's not a bit to go to because it means you have unanswered questions and you need to answer those. So it doesn't make sense for me to talk about those bits. Okay, Sissy, you have been great through all this. You've been just the best, and I love you.